George was the first son of Amandus and Mary Hoschke, born in Bathurst area in 1871 and came to the Orara Valley with his family when he was 15. By the age of 22, George was the eldest of 13 Hoschke children, the youngest being Arthur. In 1901, at the age of 30, George married Rosetta Maston, known as Eddie, a young English woman who had travelled from Yorkshire as a child with her family. 3 short years after their marriage, tragedy struck the Hoschke family in January 1905, with George's youngest brother Arthur passing away suddenly after contracting rheumatic fever 6 days earlier. Newspapers reported that 11-year-old Arthur's funeral was one of the largest ever seen here, testifying to the great esteem in which his family were held. 6 months later, further tragedy struck when George's wife Eddie passed away at the age of 28 from acute pericarditis and recurrent attacks of rheumatic fever. This must have been devastating for the family, and Eddie and Arthur are buried together in Coffs Harbour Cemetery. 6 years after Eddie's death, George married again, aged 40, to Elizabeth Aitchison, a Scottish lass who had moved to the colonies as a child with her family. George and Elizabeth were married in Brisbane, and over the next 6 years they had 3 sons, John, known as Jack, Colin and Norman, and resided mostly in the Coffs Harbour area. During his life, George had many jobs. He worked in a steam-powered sugar mill at Orara. He cut timber with his brother Frank using a pit saw. He was employed for a time on road construction at various locations in the district, but by the time his first wife, Rosetta, passed away, he had a dairy farm. After successfully carrying out dairying, George joined the board of the Karamba Butter Factory in 1915 and continued as a member until the amalgamation with the Coffs Harbour factory. He was chairman of the board for several years, and later he was vice chairman until the factory was sold. The P&C Association was another of his interests, and he was president for quite a few years. With the late J.J. Boltwood, he was one of the prime movers to have the Methodist Church built in the Orara Valley. In 1951, at his 80th birthday celebration, George was described as the oldest pioneer still residing in the district. He was residing on the farm where he had lived practically all of his life. Friends of Mr. Hoschke will be pleased to know that he was still enjoying reasonably good health and doing odd jobs around the farm up until a late age. George passed away 5 years later at the age of 85, and he's buried with his wife Elizabeth, who had passed away 10 years earlier, in the Coffs Harbour Historical Cemetery. Their graves are quite badly deteriorated, and we'll take time over the next few months, as always, to keep an eye on them and to see if we can clean them up.